Welcome to the Maintenance Community Podcast, a podcast for people who want to learn all things about maintenance and reliability. I'm your host, I'm Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep. And each week I'll be meeting with an expert in the maintenance community to take a deep dive into topics that help elevate the entire industry. Our topics are sourced from the Maintenance Community Slack group, which is the largest online community of maintenance professionals all around the world. And today I'm super excited to have Josh Wagner here on the show. Josh is currently the Director of Marketing and IT for Fluitec. It's an industrial lubricant company that delivers different solutions to help maximize life performance of lubricants and machinery. He's also the chairman of Lubrication and Reliability Virtual Summit, a full event that's focused on lubrication within our reliability industry. So welcome to the podcast, Josh. I'm super excited to learn from you.
Hey, Ryan, great to be here. Thanks for having me. And I'm a big fan of what you're doing.
So the way that we always kick things off, Josh, is to have you share a little bit more about yourself, your journey, and how you were first introduced into this, field of maintenance and reliability.
This harkens back to my college days. I went to Virginia Military Institute, but between semesters, I was a shipping clerk at a company that provided condition monitoring services to the aerospace industry. So for me, it was quite by accident that I was into this world of maintenance reliability. So once I learned the ropes and the importance of condition monitoring, I started in sales and support and getting out into the field. And this is where I learned how intense and how much these maintenance professionals really needed to know, to manage assets. When you want to work on an aircraft, you need to have a federal certification, airframe and power plant certification from the FAA. And this means they're personally responsible for any maintenance actions that they take, right? I mean, worst case scenarios like fines and jail time, whatever. But I only say that to show how dedicated and how serious maintenance and reliability is. We diversified into other areas. So one day I'm in my suit and tie talking to a maintenance director at an airline. The next day I'm in my work boots and hard hat at a landfill. And then the following day I'm in my shorts and a polo shirt on a yacht talking to a marine engineer, right? It was a major mind shift for me, and it really gave me the perspective at the different levels of knowledge and exposure that each of these different profiles professionals had for lubrication. So when I started with Fluitec, it totally flipped the equation where our typical audience was mostly focused on the lubrication itself, So those chemistry, the fluid properties. And I sort of saw the gap between the typical maintenance reliability that we talked about, and then this world of lubrication. And it was one of the reasons that inspired us to create this, we call LRVS, Lubrication and Reliability Virtual Summit.
I'm pretty sure this entire industry, the whole MRO industry, actually started from aviation. There's a huge amount of knowledge base that comes from the aviation and aerospace industry within maintenance and reliability. So, my guess, Josh, is you've got the best of best training. So obviously now you're over at Fluitec and you've dedicated a big portion of your career towards lubrication. So I think that's kind of what today's conversation is all about. When should an organization really start thinking about lubrication as a key critical component towards their maintenance reliability program?
Right at the beginning. Your very own Ricky Smith recently posted a study in TMC, actually. 70 to 85% of failures are considered self-induced, right?
Yep.
So 40% of those are lubricated related. So we're talking 30 to 35% of all failures are lubricated related. If you isolate just bearings, just one component of all these lubricated things, you're talking 60 to 80% of all bearing failures are lubricated related. So understanding the fundamentals of lubrication and lubrication management is totally key. Every maintenance organization should have a serious focus on lubrication, I would say, at any stage of the game.
These machines are turning 24 hours a day. You definitely have to have that. Where do you see most companies making the biggest mistakes around lubrication? What are some easy gotchas and easy pitfalls that companies fall into?
It could be as simple as handling lubricants? Like, where do we store them? How do we store them? Right? What do we do when we order them? How do we choose the right lubricants? Right? So it's tough to say that there's this one, worst, case scenario where that's the one that always gets you, right? Within lubrication management, there's so many these areas. There's contamination control, right? So how well sealed were their overhaul shops? Is this whole room sealed off? Where's the air coming in from? Is it filtered air? If they have any type of metallic material getting into the bearings, they need to know that. I mean, that's just one small example of this whole process. So I don't think there is just one I gotcha type thing. But if you think about it, we're all asset managers, right? If you have a car or a lawnmower, you're an asset manager, right? How much do you think about lubrication from that aspect, right? So now let's take a gas or steam turbine, right? That's hooked up to a generator, so we're producing electricity, right? So we have real output other than just driving down to the store. And this thing has a 16,000 gallon reservoir of oil. 70% of the world's energy, produced by these turbines, is literally riding on a film of oil that's like as thick as your hair. If that oil fails, there's some big consequences, right? So it's not such a great outcome. Some of these organizations, we find opportunities to highlight lubrication and lubrication failure modes so we can increase their reliability, right? The value is you could reduce your failures by 30 to 35% by having all these, a proper lubrication management program in place.
Yeah, I mean, the value prop is absolutely there. What you highlighted earlier. I've seen a lot of interesting technology come out of all of this as well, Josh, from these things called grease bots to, these real-time condition monitoring solutions. I'm curious, Josh, if you've seen anything out there, what are you most excited by around technology, new innovations in this space?
So I'm a huge tech fan, right? I use the word data because there's so much surrounding that, right? So you have IoT, sensors, AI, all these things are intermixing with the traditional, right, sets of data. So traditional sets of data in this world is oil analysis, right? You pull a sample, you send it off. There's massive amount of data that can be used to set limits, do some predictive type analysis on the same oil type in this piece of equipment, in this use case. We can generate predictive models for that. I think the next step is, all these different types of sensors, which are not measuring the same things that are measured in a lab. They make a lot of calculations to get to similar type of results because you can do it there and it's real time and you can collect so many parts of the data and then have that correlated with laboratory results, right? So that we have good confidence in that data. So that's a big thing. And I would say that the next step, which is not so much being done now because there's so many different platforms and there's still, the data's too siloed, I would say, is marrying those results with operational data. I think once we get to that aspect, once we are able to marry both the real-time oil, the traditional oil samples, and real-time operational data, once we can marry those together, then that's where AI kicks in, and that's where you're going to see massive amounts of improvements in reliability.
I think to your point, Josh, we're already starting to see it in small little pockets here in the US and different countries, including China. Really, really interesting. Your point around this real-time monitoring, or bringing real-time condition monitoring data with operational data, I think is absolutely going to happen, and hopefully very, very soon too. Because to your point, the current standard right now is pull an oil sample, ship it to a lab, get results back in a couple of days. But it's all about the feedback cycle, right? And when that feedback cycle is days versus minutes or seconds, even, that increases, speeds up the iteration. cycle so that we can improve. So we talked a little bit about like where lubrication's at today. A few gotchas around contamination. We talked about the future of this space and some cool technology. I'm an emerging leader within my business right now, and I'm wanting to put together a more robust lubrication program. Do you have any like suggestions, tips, advice for our listeners that are wanting to put a better and more robust lubrication program within their business today?
The first thing you probably want to do is have an assessment. Get a trusted consultant or a company to come in and take a look at all of your lubed areas. They'll typically have a checklist of what to do right down the line. Again, we mentioned earlier about lube storage. There's these fantastic systems that you can have color coded. So whether it's your people or you've got people coming in helping you with the lube program, they know which fluid to use, right? There's nothing worse than putting the wrong the wrong type of fluid in the wrong asset, right? So you've got storage and lube management from that side of it. There's the training aspect, right? So find a good training source, get your people trained, and try to make the lubrication process, right, as simple as possible.
Yeah, as you think about wanting to accelerate your career within maintenance reliability, obviously lubrication is a big component to that. If you want to really take your career up to that next level, where do you find yourself learning more content around lubrication? Do you have any great suggestions, tips, advice, places for our listeners to go to learn more?
A huge part for me is LinkedIn, right? So there's so many experts there. Get on the TMC Slack community for real. As we mentioned earlier, LRVS, which is a learning function, right? It's an event. We have 50 to 70 speakers. You just unload all this type of expertise on, right? And not just for professional development, right? So things like LinkedIn and Audible for audiobooks, we do for personal and professional development. So I would say learn from there.
And Josh, where can all of our listeners follow you and connect with you?
Please connect me on LinkedIn or send me an email at j.wagner@fluitec.com.
All right, there you have it. Thank you again, Josh, for joining us. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into today's episode of the Maintenance Podcast. My name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep. You can also connect with me. I'm super active on LinkedIn. You can also find me and also Josh on the Maintenance Community Slack group. You can feel free to ask us any questions, follow up from today's episode, or also suggest future topics. You can sign up at upkeep.org and find the Maintenance Community Slack group. I hope to connect with all of you guys soon. And until next time, thanks again, Josh.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.